The volcanic ash dragged Franklin Sousley down as he staggered off the landing craft. That February 19th, 1945, on the beaches of Iwo Jima, bullets whistled past the steel pot on his head, mortars detonated with teeth-shattering force, and friends fell all around him. There was no cover, nowhere to hide. Marines desperately tried to dig foxholes, but after every shovelful of sand, the wet, mushy black sand filled the hole again. Ahead, a Marine dropped, his body twisting before crumpling into the ash. Franklin lunged forward, grabbing the man by his collar and dragged him behind a half-buried Amtrac. His chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath, his fingers trembling against the man's still form. As he hugged the treacherous sand, his mind reeled at the scale of the nightmare. He was one of 6,200 Marines spearheading the assault along a 3,000-yard beachhead, all part of the same collective nightmare. By the end of that blood-soaked day, the Marines had gained just 200 yards, all paid for in suffering and loss. For a fleeting moment, he thought of home, of the promise he'd made to his mother. "Mama, I'm gonna do something to make you proud of me. When I come back, I'll be a hero." And he would keep his word. Franklin Sousley was no stranger to hardship. Growing up on a Kentucky farm during the Great Depression, losing his father at just 9 years old, and stepping into the role of man of the house while still a child had forged a quiet strength in him. At 19, Franklin was already a survivor. The tobacco fields of Hilltop, Kentucky had taught him grit and perseverance, but it was the promise he made to his mother Goldie that propelled him now. He'd vowed to make something of himself, to return home a hero. But nothing in his hard-lived life had prepared him for the horrors of Iwo Jima. More than 70,000 Marines were thrown against a 2-mile stretch of black volcanic sand. For days, naval and aerial bombardments rained down on the island, with 5,800 tons of bombs pounding its surface. Yet the Japanese defenders, entrenched in a network of tunnels, bunkers, and blockhouses, remained virtually untouched, ready to unleash hell. On February 19, 1945, Franklin landed with the 12th wave. The beach was eerily quiet at first, the Japanese biding their time. The volcanic ash swallowed men's boots, made digging foxholes impossible, and slowed the advance to a crawl. And then the trap was sprung. Bullets tore through the air. Mortars erupted in fiery bursts. Franklin flung himself flat against the sand, his heart pounding as he felt bullets rip through his uniform. He wrote to his mother that night, "I got some bullet holes through my clothing, and I sure am happy that I am still okay." Over 22,000 Japanese defenders lay in wait, armed with a labyrinth of 16 miles of tunnels and fortified bunkers. The Japanese were ready to fight to the last man. They would never surrender. After securing the beachheads, Franklin Sousley and the 3,000 men of the 28th Regiment, 5th Marine Division, faced one of the most pivotal and harrowing objectives of the entire campaign: sever Mount Suribachi from the rest of Iwo Jima. Towering and ominous, the volcanic mountain loomed over the island, its barren slopes concealing 2,000 Japanese soldiers entrenched in a labyrinth of 750 blockhouses, camouflaged bunkers, and 16 miles of interwoven tunnels. It was the keystone of General Kuribayashi's defense, and the Marines had orders to rip it out, inch by bloody inch. By February 20th, 1945, barely a day after landing, the 28th Regiment began their push forward. Constant fire from artillery, mortars, and machine guns seemed to erupt from nowhere. Franklin's unit crawled through black volcanic ash that clung to their sweat-drenched uniforms like a second skin. It didn't take long for Franklin to prove his mettle. When his squad was pinned down by a concealed machine gun nest, he charged forward, hurling grenades into the opening. The blast silenced the gun, giving his comrades the critical seconds they needed to advance. Word of his courage spread quickly. Franklin was fearless, selfless, and relentless. In a rare letter home, he tried to explain the nightmare of scaling Suribachi. The hill was hard, and I sure never expected war to be like it was those days. The second day brought new torment. Torrential rain turned the ash into thick, clinging mud, bogging down Marines and tanks alike. Snipers hidden on top of the cliffside took their toll, and every shot was a reminder of how exposed they really were. Yard by yard, Franklin and his comrades clawed their way up the mountain, using grenades and flamethrowers to clear bunkers and tunnels. On February 23rd, after 4 grueling days and the loss of 510 Marines, the summit finally came within reach. The steep, rocky slopes of Mount Suribachi were littered with the bodies of defenders who fought to their last breath. At last, the mountain fell silent. For a fleeting moment, there was relief. But the Marines knew better. This was only the beginning. Iwo Jima's heart had been pierced, but its limbs still failed. By February 23, 1945, after 4 days of brutal combat, the summit of Mount Suribachi was finally under American control. That morning, a small patrol climbed the peak with orders to secure it. Among their gear was a small American flag. When the stars and stripes were raised above the barren volcanic mountain, the moment was electric. Across Iwo Jima, Marines erupted in cheers, battleships blared their horns, and the chaotic beachhead roared in celebration. But Colonel Chandler Johnson, commander of the 28th Regiment, had a vision far grander. He ordered, "Make it a bigger one." He demanded a flag so large it could be seen across the island. Franklin Sousley's platoon, part of the 2nd Battalion, was selected for the task. With them was runner René Gagnon, carrying a salvaged flag from USS Missoula. The climb to the summit was fraught with tension. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers still lurked in the labyrinth of tunnels, waiting for the right time to launch an attack. When they reached the summit, Franklin and the other Marines used a heavy steel drainage pipe to secure the flag, anchoring it to the rocky ground. As they lifted it into place, Associated Press photographer Joe Rosenthal, who had just arrived, instinctively raised his camera. In that instant, he captured an image of 6 Marines raising the flag at a perfect 45-degree angle. That photograph would become one of the most iconic symbols of American sacrifice and unity. The spectacle was witnessed by Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal, who had just landed and gazed up at the flag on Suribachi. Overwhelmed, he declared, "The raising of that flag on Suribachi means a Marine Corps for the next 500 years." So moved was he by the sight that he attempted to claim the flag as a personal souvenir. But the triumph was fleeting. From the dark caves below, Japanese soldiers launched a frenzied counterattack. Like ghosts, they emerged from hidden tunnels, screaming as they charged. One wielded a broken sword, and another fired wildly. Grenades flew in both directions as the summit became a battlefield. Franklin and his platoon fought tooth and nail to defend the flag. Rifles cracked, grenades erupted, and flamethrowers roared to life, sending fire into the dark mouths of the caves. The fight was over in minutes. The attackers were cut down, their counterstrike crushed, and the flag stood defiantly against the sky. Not a single Marine was lost in the defense. In the days that followed, the grim aftermath became clear. Over 150 Japanese soldiers were found lifeless inside the caves, most of them victims of self-inflicted wounds. This was not the end of the battle for Iwo Jima, but for a brief moment on that volcanic summit, Franklin and his brothers had created a timeless symbol of American pride and honor. By March 21, 1945, the 28th Regiment had pushed deep into Iwo Jima's northern sector, an unforgiving labyrinth of caves, jagged rocks, and traps. Franklin Sousley, just 19 years old but a battle-hardened veteran, could feel the nightmare nearing its end. He wrote home to his mother, his words carrying a mix of hope and exhaustion. "This island is practically secured. Look for my picture, because I helped put the flag up. Please don't worry and write." That day, his unit advanced over open terrain under a relentless hail of gunfire. Franklin, ever the dependable Marine, led the advance. Then it happened. A single shot cracked through the din, striking Franklin in the back and severing his spine. He collapsed, his hands brushing at his shirt as if swatting a fly. A fellow Marine rushed to his side while ducking for cover. "How you doing?" Franklin responded with eerie calm. "Not bad, I don't feel anything." Those were his last words. Moments later, he was gone. Easy Company was pulled from the front lines just 3 days later, their ranks devastated. The boy from Hilltop, Kentucky, who had grown up milking cows and was forced to become a soldier, never saw the legacy he left behind. He never saw Joe Rosenthal's iconic photograph of the flag rising atop Mount Suribachi, never knew it had become a national emblem of hope and unity. In the weeks following the battle, the photograph swept across the United States, rallying a war-weary nation. Franklin's mother, Goldie, received the devastating telegram on April 9, 1945. The image of her son, immortalized in one of history's most famous photographs, arrived on her doorstep almost simultaneously with the news of his tragic end. The cost of Iwo Jima was shocking. Of Chandler Johnson's 2nd Battalion, which began with 1,688 men, only 177 walked off the island. In 36 days of unrelenting combat, 25,851 Marines were lost or wounded. Among them, 6,821 fell and were buried in makeshift graves at the base of Mount Suribachi. Franklin was interred in grave number 2189. It took a decade for their bodies to be brought home. Franklin had once promised his mother, "When I come back, I'll be a hero." Though not like he would have wanted, his promise was fulfilled.